Well, hi, I'm Sean in St. Louis, and welcome to the Marketing Gateway. And today we have an interview with Adam Collins of Bearded Board Games. Now, Adam is an entrepreneur. He also works at the University of Missouri St. Louis as a project manager in the Planning, Design, and Construction division. And he's a really sharp guy, but he had this experience when he's working at UMSL where he observed that there was an opportunity to play board games with people during lunch and you're going to hear him talk about in the interview, to build bridges with people through this board gaming experience. But the problem is when you're playing games at lunch, they got to be pretty short, right? So maybe you could bring a deck of cards or play some Uno or something like that. Or maybe you could find games that people are not as familiar with and introduce them to them. And so that's kind of where he found his niche and his ability to start thinking about board games, not just as a business, which he's definitely in the business of now, but also as something to connect people. And you know I love stuff like that. That is exactly the kind of thing we're trying to do here on the Marketing Gateway, is bring our community together. And so I'm so excited to bring part one of this interview because I met Adam at Entrepreneurs Alley at the Midwest Digital Marketing Conference a couple weeks ago. He and his son were there. They set up a booth. They were talking about their board games, Fences and Locked Out, which are both really great looking games. And I was so excited to get a chance to talk with them there and then to invite him to be on the show to talk about what he's doing. So here is part one of our interview. Enjoy. Welcome to the Marketing Gateway. I'm Sean in St. Louis, and I've got with me tonight Adam Collins. And Adam is from Bearded Board Games. So excited to have you on, Adam. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, great to be here.
And I know you're an experienced podcaster as well, so this will be a really natural conversation, I'm sure. But I thought we'd start off with, why don't you tell me something surprising that I don't know? I ask this of all of my guests. So something surprising I don't know. It can be anything you'd like to share.
Sure. So really, it's two things. One of them is, like, we travel a lot and drive and have atlases in the car and stuff. And so Missouri is actually the only state of the 50 that the capital city is not on an interstate.
That is interesting.
That's what happens when you're driving in a car with an atlas. You know, what else are you going to do? And the other one is Arkansas is the only state you can drive south to get into. From Arkansas, you can drive south to get into every state that borders it.
Interesting.
I don't know why I know that either. So,
you must have done a lot of driving.
A lot of driving with an atlas in the car. That's all I can say.
Well, that's fascinating. I did not know either of those things, and now I'm going to think about that every time I'm driving through Missouri or Arkansas. So.
It is weird because you think about it, like Jefferson City is not on an interstate, and it's not really easily accessible either. And it's the only state of the 50 that's like that, which is just so Missouri.
So Missouri, exactly. Well, you know, in this series on the Marketing Gateway, we are focused on the St. Louis area. So tell me how you came and lived to work around here.
So I am originally from Indiana and then graduated college, moved to Chicago. But I was dating a person who was from the St. Louis greater area. We got married and we moved here right after we got married. And I've been here ever since, which will be 20 years this summer.
So I have to ask you, since you're from Indiana, were you really confused when you got here and found out Hoosier was not a good thing?
Well, yes and no. I was a Boilermaker, so I went to Purdue, and our rival is the Indiana Hoosiers, and so Hoosiers was always a bad thing to me anyway. But it was interesting to hear it as, you know, like we use it as not so much derogatory, but as you know, that's so Hoosier, you know, being so, you know, redneck and stuff like that. It was an interesting thing, but it wasn't weird for me to associate Hoosier with bad thing because like I said, they were our mortal enemies in the NCAA and the Big Ten.
That's funny to think that Boilermakers would be a better transplant to St. Louis because they already have that built-in bias.
Absolutely.
Well, you know, one other thing I'd like to ask folks is something about the St. Louis area that you wish other people knew.
Yeah, I think we kind of talked about this when we met, which we'll get to here in a minute. But St. Louis as a whole is a very big board gaming community and also a big board game designing and production publishing community as well. It's all over the place if you just know where to look and you find the right nerds and you follow them to the right holes, and you'll find all kinds of great people that design a lot of games. And then there's a whole lot of publishers in the St. Louis market, including Stonemeyer, who did Scythe and Wingspan are the two of their biggest titles, but they're located right here in St. Louis.
And I think I first encountered one of their games at Pieces, the board game cafe we have here in St. Louis, which is also a really neat place to go and kind of meet the board gaming community. And, that's great food. And
it's a lot of fun. It's a good place to go down there. They got great servers and hosts and stuff like that will gladly stop by your table and teach you how to play a game if you pull it off the shelf and don't have the gumption to read all the rules,
I think we made them mad one time because when my kids were younger, we found this game called Terror in Meeple City. And basically the premise of the game is you build these buildings with little meeples in between, and then you use these monsters to smash the buildings, and the meeples go flying everywhere. And
oh yeah,
we were playing it there, and they were not amused.
No. Well, it's funny. That game also used to be called Rampage before it got sued, and they had to change it to Terror in Meeple City. But the first time I went there, shortly after they opened, I took my son, who was, 5, maybe 6 at the time. He was very young. And he went, and I told him, hey, but he's been board gaming forever at that point in his life. And I told him to go get a game off the shelf. So he goes and comes back with a game that he knows, Flashpoint, the firefighter cooperative game. He brings it back, and we're setting it up, and the waitress comes by, and she's like, that game might be a little hard for him. And my son looks her deadpan in the eye, and he goes, we play this at home all the time. And she was like, okay. So I was like, I don't,
You're one of those families, right?
Yeah. Don't mess with that table over there. But no, I love Pieces. If you're in the St. Louis area and you are interested in board gaming, it's a great place to go. Especially they have a great library of games that are technically they're free, kind of. You pay your $5 library fee, but you can find harder to find games or games you're just curious about and find them on the shelf, take them down, play them, figure out if it's something you're interested in or not to purchase. So unfortunately, I fell in love with a game there that's out of print and it's super expensive. So I just have to go down to Pieces to play it because I can't afford to buy it right now.
I feel your pain. I've been there.
Yeah.
Well, so you and I met a couple weeks ago at the MDMC, the Midwest Digital Marketing Conference, which I did some episodes on. And you were in the Entrepreneurs Alley there on the last day, which was really cool. There were a lot of great folks there. In fact, we're going to have many folks from that Entrepreneurs Alley on the show throughout the next few weeks. But you were showing off board games, and you have this company that produces board games here locally. And tell me a little bit about how you got started in the business of selling and marketing board games and what you're offering.
So it all kind of started back a couple companies ago. We were playing board games at lunch, and we were always playing games that we could try to fit in a lunch hour. And I had an idea for a game, so I kind of, no idea what I was doing about prototyping and all that. But I threw together what we like to call an MVP, a minimum viable prototype, and we played it. And then another guy created a game and put together his prototype. We played it, and then we decided we should make games. Like, we should do this. And so I'd already been on Kickstarter, which if you're not on Kickstarter, don't start. Becomes really hazardous to your pocketbook. You will lose a lot of money on Kickstarter, but it is so fun, and you'll have all kinds of fun stuff that arrive randomly you forget about. And so we formed a company, Bearded Board Games, and we worked at that point. I started binging board game podcasts. There's a lot of them out there, a couple good design centric ones. And then we kind of took his game idea and ran with it over mine because his had a simpler production where it was just tiles, whereas mine was cards and boards and tiles, and I wanted to use the box as part of the game. And so we decided, that's too crazy, and let's stick with something simple in case things go sideways, which of course it did. So thank goodness we went with the easier game to produce. And so we started making the games, and then we started using our coworkers at lunch as our play testers. We called them the captive audience. They called themselves the captured audience because we were going to play a game. Why not test ours? And so we used our play testers slash coworkers, and we've been kind of doing it ever since, working on games. Then we've made a lot of mistakes production wise and small business wise, and we're getting better at doing that kind of thing. And yeah, that's we just kind of went to Kickstarter, knew next to nothing, had a very successful first campaign, and have kept trying to just do it ever since.
And when you're on Kickstarter, are you mainly trying to engage more of a local audience, or can you go worldwide with it, or who
Oh,
backs you on
worldwide.
Kickstarter?
We've had our first game, Fences, was a farming themed tile laying game, and we were it was really big in Australia. We don't know anybody in Australia. We do now, but we didn't know anybody there, and so it was interesting how many copies like resonated and sold to Australia. And then the last game we took to Kickstarter was a game that we signed from somebody else. They designed it, we signed it to publish it, and he was out of the Netherlands, and so we had a whole lot of European, Netherlands, Nordic country area copies sold that way. So Kickstarter is you have if you're going to go worldwide, be careful. There's a lot there. Shipping internationally can be expensive, and it can be cumbersome. Trying to just wade through all the paperwork. So, but we like to kind of go globally. I would say our typical audience is 10 to 15% outside the United States. So, but don't forget Canada is right over the border, but that is not uh, inside the United States. It is international. And so if you think about, oh, it's not that much to ship to Canada. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Though
I think
it could be
that's
closer.
yeah, it's the number one lesson I've seen Kickstarter founders say is that they when they ship physical goods they always underestimate the amount of international shipping.
Yeah. And it's funny. Kickstarter has created so many jobs and that didn't exist 15 years ago. So many companies, so many job markets that didn't exist 15 years ago now exist because of Kickstarter. Fulfillment agencies that have specialized in just dealing with Kickstarters, and pledge managers to collect the money and the addresses and verify everything, and all these different companies that have sprung up all over. And if you have a multi-million dollar or tens of thousands of units sold, maybe my next game, but not, I haven't yet, thank goodness, because I wouldn't know what to do. But like you can partner with those people. A lot of the manufacturers, most of it's done in China right now. Europe is making a big play to try to pick up some of the U.S. audience, the U.S. publishers. But a lot of the distributors now will even partner with them. And so, but yeah, otherwise it all ships to you just on a pallet, like you see at Costco or Sam's Club. It just shows up, and you got to hope you can unload it and have a place to store it. So, but yeah, international shipping is, if you had a lot, then they'll break down the pallets and they'll ship so many copies to this zone or this zone or uh, this distribution hub. So you have to be careful because shipping is, yeah, it is the number one way to lose your lunch.
And I don't think a lot of people think about if you're in publishing or board game manufacturing or anything here in St. Louis, you could have a global audience now. I mean, it used to be you'd have to go to the local stores or you'd have to work out distribution deals with distributors in other countries. But now it's business to consumer. You can go ahead and sell it right on into those territories. But
Yeah,
the problems that come with that are pretty big.
yeah, it's interesting. Uh, so I was there at the MDMC because it was kind of like the capstone of a course, a class that I had taken this semester, and it was hard to explain to some of these other mentors and other business people that were there that I'm selling a good, I'm selling a board game. But the board game industry is kind of weird in that it is business to consumer. So it is B2C. I do face to face. We'll talk about that here in a minute because this is
Hmm.
my favorite thing to do. Um, but we also do business to business, right? We're trying to get into retail shops. We're trying to get into retail shops so that they then are so they're B2C. So there I'm B2B to C.
Hmm.
And then again, trying to get into distribution, like you were saying, trying to get into some of these distribution hubs and distribution companies across the not just the country but the globe, then you're B2B to B2C. And it's such a weird thing. And you have to think about margins at every step because you want to try to sell your product. You want to, you don't want to, I mean, yeah, capitalism is great. We're trying to make as much money as we can, but at the same time, like you have to be careful because you have to follow the set path of the margins that the industry has kind of deemed as these are the margins, and so you're trying to work within that. And I have a buddy right now. I'm trying to meet with him next week to help him out because he's struggling with that. He's struggling with I can't sell my game wholesale because I won't make any money. I'll lose money. And it's like, well, then you got to change the way either you're selling it or you're making it. And so, I'm trying to help him look into that a little bit.
That's really interesting. And I would imagine too, there's kind of certain price points that are expected for different types of games and sizes of games. So
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's crazy. Cause there's so much that goes into that box size versus the weight of the box. I always joke that my game Fences is more it's cheaper per pound than Catan because Catan is a bigger box, but it's a lot of air, whereas my box is very tight and has no air in it because boxes are very expensive, and so our box is barely big enough to hold everything because we didn't want to spend any more money to make the box any bigger. But then the box is small, and so we had a hard time selling it at $30. But then when we dropped it to 25, boom, it sells because that's the perceived value of the bot or the game. And so then we had to think, okay, can we make money at $25 instead of 30? Because that's what we have. That's what the market will hold, and that's what the market responded to. And yeah, so I always joke that my game is more weight per dollar than Catan.
and you guys have done something interesting too, which was and I saw this when I met you in person. You have an expansion that's bigger than the core game, and you can put the core game inside, which I thought was really clever.
Yeah. That was an idea. I have a lot of board games, as you can imagine. I'm surrounded by them right now in my office slash the attic slash the. Can you have a dungeon upstairs? But it's kind of a dungeon. But yeah, and so you see a lot. Again, board games have created a lot of secondary markets that weren't around a long time ago, and the markets are getting better. And one of those is box organizers, and so you can buy a game like Catan that you can buy an organizer that holds the base game, and then it can also hold expansions in it, and you can get rid of those boxes so that the boxes don't pile up in your house. And so when we created the expansion to Fences, we created it to where the box is double the size of the base game, but it holds the base game in the middle to create its own box organizer. So all the tiles fit down the sides, and all the non-tile stuff fits in what was originally the base game box, which all then fits together in one box. So yeah.
It's such a clever idea, and honestly, as a board game fan myself, I thought, man, that would almost make the expansion just an automatic buy for me, knowing that I could just go ahead and have it all and not have to take up any more space, really. So
Yeah,
it's a great
that's
idea.
fun.
Well, let me ask you. So you talked about how you're out selling at booths, and
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that you told me was that you've had success going into places that we don't normally associate with board games, and farmers markets were one of the ones you brought up, which makes sense because you
Yes.
have a game that's kind of about a farm, right? So, um, how do you think about these booths when you're setting these up? How do you plan for going into places like that and making sure that you're making any money, and how do you make sure they're worth your time?
Well, it's funny because I was working at a different job, and this coworker of mine, she used to make handmade jewelry with her daughter. And she knew I had board games and I made board games and stuff like that. And so she's like, well, have you ever thought about farmers markets? And I'm like, no. And so, by golly, I found a farmer's market that would accept me so late in the season. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to try this out. And so it was like a $20 booth fee. So I'm like, man, I just need to sell one game. Um, and we sold a few games, and then you find out real quick, I showed up with nothing. Like I showed up with like a table and a chair, and that was it. And I already had Square and stuff like that set up because we had done conventions, board game conventions. I'll talk about that here in a second. Mm-hmm. But I had Square already set up, and then at the farmers markets every week. So I went like every week for like, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6 weeks in a row. And every week, I wish I'd have taken a picture every week because you would see the evolution of my learning at the farmers markets week to week. But you find out real quick, oh yeah, people were interested in it because they weren't expecting it. But people that go to farmers markets are very open to supporting independent people, small businesses, and they're there to buy. And so it became a pitch like, okay, well, how do I pitch my game? How do I attract people in? And then you start kind of looking around at the other booths. What are they doing? What do they have? And also, honestly, they're some of the greatest people you'll ever meet. A friend of mine said that he called it toxic positivity because they want you to do great. They want you to, they'll tell you, oh, check out this place or this event or this fair, And so to your question, you got to start figuring out, well, what's good for you and how do you vet that? And it's harder than you think. We got burned. I work hand in hand with a couple of small publishers. We booth share. Like one of us will hear about an event, we'll grab a booth, and they'll be like, "Hey, I got this booth. Are you free this weekend?" And we'll booth share. And yeah. And so we went to a convention. I won't name which one, just in case. But so we took a gamble and drove out of state to this convention, and it was pretty well attended, but the setup was really bad for vendors, and we barely broke even on expenses. And so then we decided we got to vet these better. And so we came up with some criteria, and if we hear about something or somebody reaches out to us, we try to ask questions like how many people are usually there, what other kind of vendors are there. Because if you're going into one that's like, even locally, we've done a lot of farmers markets here in the St. Louis area, and some of the smaller ones are terrible for us because, mom and pa aren't expecting to show up and buy a board game. They're just there to buy lettuce. They were there last week to buy lettuce. They're here this week to buy lettuce, and there's board games. That's just doesn't work. So we try to stick to the bigger farmers markets because those have more artisans, creators, artists, jewelry makers. There's people that do hardwood cutting boards, which are amazing. There's people that rebind books with custom fabric hardback covers, and I'm like, that's amazing. So we try to stick to the bigger ones because they have those artisan rows or whatever where they put all of us non consumables. I mean, I guess you could eat my board game if you want. But we try, when we're going to conventions, you have to try to be careful because I try to look at ones that have been around for a couple years, 3 or 4 or 5 years. So, okay, if they're doing it for a 5th year, it's probably worth taking a look at. But even then you try to ask, like, what other kind of vendors are there? Am I going to be like this, this thumb just sticking out that doesn't make sense? Or we've had a couple successes, and we've had a couple non-successes that look like successes on paper, and then it just didn't pan out. So best thing you can do is your homework. Talk to the organizer, the biggest thing is see what other kind of vendors are going to be there, and or other events that they're holding. This one we went to seemed like it was going to be great. They had a guy that was one of the original, was he one of the original designers or writers or something for the like Mortal Kombat video game series. He was giving a lecture, and there was like 8 people there. And it's like, well, we got the thing that's like, this guy's going to be there for Mortal Kombat. We're like, yeah, let's go. And there was like 8 people, and it's like, we were in the middle of a mall that was, the mall itself was pretty much dead. So we were just down the middle of the mall. But it was just like, we did our homework. It was like the fourth one, and they had like 3,000 people walk through over the last couple of years. And this year was just dead. We just hit on a bad year, I guess. But man, you try to do your homework, but that's the best you can do is talk to the organizers, see what else is going to be there, how many people are going to be there, and see what kind of marketing they're doing. That was the other thing that kind of hurt us at the convention we went to out of town. It was a well-attended convention, but even while we're there, they weren't even telling people to go visit the vendor hall. Like, it's like, we paid a bunch of money to be here, and you're not telling people to come see us. Like, you're not doing us any favors.
I've, I used to work in the comic book world. I think I told you this when we were talking before. And I've had this experience where we would go to some of the largest cons in the country back in the 2000s, and we wouldn't sell anything because there was too much competition. We weren't set up in a way where we looked very attractive or appealing. But we would go to small like author signings or things like that, and we'd sell a ton. And it was all really sometimes about the novelty of being the only one there.
Yeah. I hate the pun, like we're the only game in town, but that's like what it is. Like, but now we go to 2 big ones here in the St. Louis area, farmers markets, and people are looking for us. Mm-hmm. And so we were there, they show up, they want to buy our newest games, and they want to see what else we got coming out and that kind of thing. And that's what we're trying to build our company, and get more revenue in so we're not making money on this company at all. We're putting it all back into, the next game and the next game and the next game. But yeah, when you're at a convention, like you're saying, like, you're not those big conventions, you're not necessarily like we got the Geekway, huge convention coming up. I'll plug them here real quick. Huge convention coming up in St. Louis this weekend. So it's probably going to be too late when you hear this, but keep an eye on it for next year. Huge convention in St. Charles. And we'll go out there and sell our games. They have a booth, but there we're not like in competition with the big companies. We're just in competition with the money in your wallet. Like, we want your money in your wallet. And so you're trying to so you have to decide, you take a chance on me in my games or this bigger established company over here. We may have a better game. They're more established. Or you want 2 of their games, you want to do 2 different transactions, that kind of thing. We're at a farmer's market, like I said, we're the only board game there. So, and you were like, you like board games, and so you're like, oh, well, I'm going to buy this guy's game. So,
well, another feature of your booth, you have your son out there with you sometimes. I met him at the Entrepreneurs Row. So, does he like being part of the business?
Oh gosh, yes. So I always joke that he's my best salesman. He's also my only salesman, but therefore he's default the best. He loves it. He loves going to the events. He loves selling the games. He loves talking to people. And when he was younger, he just turned 14, but when he was like 10, and he was explaining this hobby game, so a more complex game than Candyland, and a 10-year-old explains it to you, you kind of get this false sense of, oh, I can totally play this game. This 10-year-old just explained it to me. And who's going to tell a 10-year-old no, So he loves it. He was there. I had him at the MDMC because of the event that we were doing, the Entrepreneurs Row. I wanted him to be there. He is part of the company. He travels with me, play test games with me. Actually, he and I are working on a game together that we're designing together. So yeah, he loves it. He's kind of bummed because I didn't get him a ticket this year to Geekway, but it was kind of fell between the cracks, and I forgot that it was a different setup than last year. So I don't have a ticket for him, and he's mad. So
the good thing about being young is there'll always be more shows.
There's plenty more.
Well, that's awesome. And I think, part of what really helps you, especially when you're a local company, talking to the local audience, is when you feel more personal. The big companies are great, but you can get a lot of their games anywhere. But, you meet a
Yeah.
company like Bearded Board Games, you can only really find their games. You can go on the website, of course, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but you can also buy it from you right there when you meet you and support the local gaming community.
Yeah, it's funny because when we go to these conventions outside of the St. Louis area, we've met some really good people that we swap games, and we keep in touch. And we had one of the guys, Rocket House Games. He came to Geekway last year because I shared my booth with him, and so he came down from the Chicago area. He's up by Chicago, and he came down to Geekway for the weekend and sold his games. And a lot of people, of course, like you said, that want to find the games that not like you can't find everywhere because you can't go to your local game shop because we're not there yet. Come on, game shops, back, buy our games. Um, so they bought a lot of his games because they've seen me, they've seen Bearded Board Games, and so I'm sharing a booth with him. So he's like, "Oh, this guy must be good because I know the Bearded Board Games guy, and he did pretty well last year, just selling his little $20 and $25 game, and sold a bunch of them." And you do meet a lot of people, and I mean, I have a lot of games that are small independent publishers that I just met from other conventions. So
I love that. And, I think there's this idea some people have that just, there's tons and tons of game ideas. Anybody can make a board game, right? I mean, I think I told you, I even dreamed one time. I dreamed the rules. I dreamed us playing it. I sat down and wrote it down, and we actually tried it. It didn't work out as well in reality.
no, it never works out.
Yeah,
No.
But at least, the creative spark is there, right? But, marketing a game is more than just the idea. It is definitely about, I mean, we talked about some of the production issues, but there's also just making sure that it's tuned to the right audience, and that the rules are clear, and that people can understand how to play it, and that there's a strategy there that doesn't break the game if somebody starts to employ it.
It's amazing how many games get to market that have that dominant strategy, and you're like, this is a game from a legit publisher. Like, how did this get through playtesting? Yeah.
Well, that seems like a great place to leave you in suspense about what we're going to learn next. And in our next interview, we're going to continue to talk about the experience of selling board games at farmers markets. We're going to talk about conventions that are coming up. We're going to talk about this podcast, which is called the Eat, Lunch, and Board Game Podcast. And Adam also has a YouTube channel with his son that is called Reviews from the Attic. And so we'll talk about all of that and more in the next interview. Now, if you are interested in Bearded Board Games, they are at beardedboardgames.com, and they have some games for sale. Fences and Locked Out, I mentioned in the introduction. I've bought both of them. Adam showed them to me, and Fences is a lot like Carcassonne, if you're familiar with that game, and Locked Out kind of gave me some vibes of Among Us, maybe combined, which is a video game, kind of combined with some of the other kind of games where you have objectives where you're working together, but you're also competing against each other. They have a game coming up soon called Packlash, which looks really cool. And it's not on their website, but he showed me this other game they have coming up, which is about playing soccer. And I mentioned that to my nephew who loves soccer, and he was excited. So they have so many cool things on the horizon. Be sure to check them out, beardedboardgames.com. And they're also going to be at the Geekway convention this weekend. So if you happen to be going to the board game convention or didn't know there was a board game convention and you want to go, be sure to go there and say hi to Adam and his son. Thanks so much. I'm Sean in St. Louis. This has been the Marketing Gateway, and we will see you next time.